I'm Tom Osman, and this is Whatever Comes Next, the podcast where I explore the world of underground and independent music making. And on today's episode, I am talking with Kelly Waldrip and Marc Kaufman of heavy fusion instrumental duo Sludgebucket, who have just recently put out their latest album, Vampiric Earth. And heavy fusion, yes, I give credit to Kyle at Good Boy PR, who also, in fact, made this interview possible. So thank you, Kyle. But also for coming up with the term heavy fusion. Because as we discuss in this interview, to explain what Sludgebucket sound like is quite difficult. Despite the use of the word sludge in the title, this is not sludge metal. It is a variety of different elements, and they have also evolved over the years. In fact, not so long ago, the band also featured guitars and they featured vocals, but their current stage, they are purely bass and drums. And it's a configuration that I think works really well for the band. And so, yeah, Kelly has been leading the band since its inception in the early aughts. And I think now Marc has been in the band for about 10 years. So the band has quite the history, and we do get into talking about that as well as their music and various other topics relating to the music business that I find interesting to explore on this podcast. You can check out the album on Bandcamp. I believe it is also on Spotify. And if I'm wrong, I'll edit that part out. But for the sake of your honest, hardworking, independent bands, if I may just say, it's always well appreciated if you go to Bandcamp and, buy yourself a digital copy. Not only will you still have it in case Spotify suddenly stops existing or goes down, but you also give a little bit for the bands themselves. If you go see the band live, you can also get a copy of the album on CD. And yeah, you can follow them on Facebook, on Instagram, on Blue Sky as well. And they are a couple of lovely guys as well. So yeah, I dig the music. I dig the people. I strongly suggest that you check them out. I'm going to play a track from Vampiric Earth at the end with a little clip coming up in just a moment. And yeah, if you want to follow me, Tom Osman Sounds, Instagram, Facebook, and Blue Sky. You can check out what I'm doing musically at tomosmansounds.com. And I don't remember if there's anything else. Yes, wherever you are listening to or watching this episode, thumbs up, 5 stars, comments, all these kind of things are very nice and appreciated. And I suppose they help in some way in whatever algorithms are bubbling away in the background. Thank you for your interest. Thank you for your time. There is nothing further to be said, I believe, than Kelly and Marc of Sludgebucket. Take it away. There he is. We have you both. Marc, hi. Tom, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Tom.
I was just about to get into asking Kelly, because I'm fascinated about working for a company that makes toys. So how did you end up working for this company? I'm presuming this was not like some lifelong ambition to be involved with making kids' toys.
No, but it works out because I'm like, I'm an adult child, so and I have a 7-year-old, so it worked out. I was at a job for a long time, and it just didn't have the advances that I wanted, and so I went to a job that paid more, and it turned out to be kind of a nightmare. So I was jumping from that one and I lucked out on this one. I've been here almost 2 years now.
And are the two of you based quite nearby? You're in Oakland, right?
We rehearse in Oakland. I now live in Oakland, and Marc's in Novato.
And you'll have to excuse my geography is terrible in general, but when it comes to US geography, I've got nothing. So like how far do you two have to travel to get together?
He doesn't have to travel barely. He travels like 3 minutes from his house.
Yeah.
I travel it's about 35, 40 minutes from me. I'm over on the North Bay, up in the North Bay.
Okay, I guess that's not too bad. Like I was just back a few days ago in Australia because I'm originally from Australia, but I'm now living in the UK. I've moved around a bit, but I lived in Europe most of my life, and one of the things I noticed is just like the scale for Australia and I guess the US as well is so different to Europe. In Europe, it's just kind of you get used to things being relatively quite close together. But
Yeah.
I realized when I was in Australia, like it's very unsettling for me to live in a world where there are suburbs, and it's like you got to travel for a while to get out to get to the center. It's very alien to me. So what it like have you both kind of been living in like relatively the same area that you've always lived, or have you traveled around a bit?
So yeah, I've moved around, but it's all within like 20 minutes of each other. So it's been like grew up in San Lorenzo, moved to San Leandro, Oakland, Hayward. So it's all within, like yeah, 20 minutes. So it's relatively small, moves.
Yeah, so you kind of
Yeah.
like you're pretty comfortable with the environment. It feels like home to you.
Yeah.
And Mark?
Yeah, for me, I grew up in San Francisco, so yeah, and then short stint in Santa Barbara, and then yeah, after a while, moved up to the North Bay here. So pretty much local my whole life.
And that's all California, right?
All California, yeah.
Okay.
San Francisco and Santa Barbara, yeah, all California.
In terms of like, I know there are other things that occur in the US like earthquakes. Is that the kind of stuff that you have to, are there any kind of like, this is a weird topic to start with, but any natural
Yeah.
disasters that you have to deal with? Or are you like, is it quite quiet from that point of view where you are?
It's earthquakes, but for a long time they've been quite mellow. Like my last one was, I think, a couple weeks ago, and it was only like I think a 4.5 or something, which it was quick too. It just shook, and then there was like a little bit afterwards, and then it was done. That's all I felt.
Yeah. Been a ton of little ones. I've been in both of the big ones. I must be a magnet for them. I don't know, but I was in the 89 one here, and then I was in the northern one in LA in the 90s, which Kelly knows the story well. It was a weird night where I actually met Lemmy. It's a crazy, weird thing, like out of a movie. The whole was bizarre, but fun in a way.
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna live through like a big earthquake, if you meet Lemmy on the same night, I mean, that
It's
definitely
kind of weird.
makes a pretty big story. All right, well, I think you have to tell the story. I mean, I know we want to talk about Sludgebucket, but I want to know the story about you meeting Lemmy and the earthquake.
So I was down with a band. I was young, very young at the time. We were down there meeting some people, and we were at a bar, local bar in the Valley, in San Fernando Valley in Los Angeles. And at the time, what we thought were these kind of middle-aged heavy metal chicks came up to us and say, "Hey, you guys want to go to a video in the Hollywood Hills? We're just shooting a video, a heavy metal video, and Lemmy's going to be there." We're like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, whatever, sure." And eventually, my guitar player's like, "Yeah, let's follow them." So we follow them up, go up to this house and in the Hollywood Hills and walk in, and there's Lemmy leaning against the pole with the bullet belt, the bottle of Jack, just like normal. And me, like a young kid, bugged him with a bunch of questions, and he was super cool about it. And everything, they say about him, he was really, really cool. So yeah, and then later that night, woke up in on the other side of the room from the earthquake. And then,
Wow.
at the end of this long story, we're all like, I wonder what happened to Lemmy.
I mean, that would have been pretty
So
wild. Like, if at the end of it was just like you die now, but you get to meet Lemmy, and now we're going to kill you in an
I
earthquake.
would have been okay.
So I know that there's quite a lot of history with this band, and obviously, Kelly, you're the one that started it. Mark, you came in a little bit later. I want to see if I get this right. Mark, did you come in? Is your first record with Sludgebucket? Was it Meandering in the Clouds in 2014? Did I get that right?
Kelly, is that before shedding? I don't know. I can't remember.
Yeah, that was before shedding because it was like basically a jam that we recorded.
Yeah.
Okay. So I know, like, and Kelly, you formed. I need to straighten something out because I've seen mixed reports here. You either formed in 2004 or 2006, I think. Which one is it?
So 2004 was when I came up with the idea and started writing the songs. And then, we really got them refined and recorded and then put out in the first self-titled full length was 2006.
Okay. So I'm like, I am intrigued by some of the history of the band, and I'm intrigued by the way that your sounds change, and obviously there have been lineup changes as well. But I have to say that I think what you have come to now with the two of you as an instrumental band, I think this format really suits you. I think it's really cool. And I would
Oh,
say
right
that
on.
like it's the most kind of unique sounding, I would say, like where you are at the moment. And I'm kind of wondering from your point of view and thinking about Vampiric Earth in general, because I think you had you had this release maybe last year where you reworked some of your older songs, but you did them in this new format. And I guess this is kind of like the first full album of new material where it's this new way of having just the two of you and just instrumental. Is that right? It's the first full album without vocals.
Yes, yes.
So it seems to me like when I listen to some of your other stuff and I listen to the new album, I understand like, kind of like your styles evolved over the years and you did have various different influences throughout. But I was kind of wondering to myself, would you say like when you think about how your sound is now, does it feel to you like you have changed quite a lot in the last few years? And is part of that to do with the fact that now you don't have the vocals, you're filling the space more with the bass and the drums, so it's kind of like freeing things up to create more with the instrumentation? Does that seem like kind of the way to describe it?
Yeah, that sounds about right. I think throughout it's evolved with the different players, but essentially still, me writing, but then yeah, definitely not having the vocals. Yeah, where it's freeing because we have all this space, but at the same time we don't want to crowd up the space. So it's like, okay, well, no guitar, so I'm adding, more, but I've always kind of played melodically on bass anyway. So
Yeah.
guitar was more a, typically a rhythmic instrument and did a lot of things that were similar to what I was doing. So taking that out of the equation, I mean, there was definitely some great guitar players that we played with over the years, but taking that out of the equation, you know, was more freeing than it was constraining.
And I don't know if I can think of that many. I mean, I can't think of any off the top of my head, but I'm sure there are some bands who've gone from having more players and specifically having vocals to downsizing and becoming an instrumental band. Was there any, like, what was the inspiration behind moving in that direction?
There was no band inspiration. It was basically our longtime guitar player Brad moved to New Mexico, and it was like, well, I'm always kind of like, not straight tunnel vision, but it's like I'm just like, let's just keep going forward, and just figure it out along the way. And that's what we did. We just started recording. I kept doing vocals. We did what was it, escapism, but still had vocals, but it was only bass and drums and vocals. And then I found I still like writing, lyrics and stuff like that, but I felt like I didn't really want to, keep going with vocals. I don't really have the passion for it, and it takes a lot more time away from the focus. And I've been listening to a lot more post metal stuff, like Russian Circles, Pelican, that do fine with no vocals, and I think that frees it up as well too, because then. I mean, I always mixed up my vocal styles based on what the song was about. I would kind of go with what the lyrical emotion was. So whether it be
Mm.
heavier or more melodic, but I just kind of felt like this would also free it up too, in a sense where, some bands, I remember being a kid and you'd hear certain bands and you're like, oh, the band's great. And the vocals come in and you're like, oh man, it almost kind of ruins it. But then if you like it enough, you just listen to it, that you're like, okay, I accept the vocals. I'm with it now. But, so this frees it up to where if people don't like, because there's quite a few times we played shows and people are grooving on the music. Once I start belting out vocals, they're like, some people who like mellower stuff, they get scared, and I'm like, okay, I don't want that. It's like, so that was part of it too. But I think I didn't really have the interest as much anymore. Overall,
Yeah.
that's where it started. Yeah.
And Mark, for you as the drummer, has that made any kind of significant difference to the way that you're playing or that you're, because I noticed I don't remember if you listed this in your previous releases, but on the latest release, you're both written down credited with arrangement So I thought it's kind of interesting that you've specifically chosen to write arrangement, which suggests that's kind of like quite a big part of the process of making the music. Has that made a big difference to you, like not having the vocals in terms of how you're filling the space?
No, I never listened to them anyway. No, I'm just kidding. uh, I think on the release where we had the other release you talked about were some other pre-existing songs. It took where we had vocals before. That was an adjustment period, but we got used to it. But then after that, no. And I've liked and listened to a lot of, like Kelly, a lot of bands that there are no vocals, and a lot of bands I grew up on. I loved, had big, cool instrumental sections, even if there were vocals there. So as far as the writing and arranging process, I mean, part of that I think has also come from, being with Kelly for a long time. And then, he started kind of, going, and we just started naturally evolving to where we're bouncing ideas of, arrangement and, what do we want to do? Do we want to do this section again? How many times? All that kind of stuff. But yeah, and then from a writing standpoint, I mean, I just really try to just go along with what is going to fit the best, for the, the music overall. So if there were vocals, yeah, I would probably adjust something, because to not step on that, it'd be more subtle things.
Yeah. And like I would say, it's not just the case for Vampiric Earth, but like I've listened to some of your music on various different sources. And then I listened to it on better headphones and went like, oh, like you can really hear like, like the like the texture, if that's the right way to put it. Like, it's very satisfyingly meaty, the bass and the drums. And I'm not sure, again, if I've seen on your other releases, but there's no mention on Vampiric Earth of like who recorded it, producer, etc. Did you do that yourselves or you worked with someone else?
Yeah, we've been recording ourselves for a while. I learned, let's see, it's been some years now from a good buddy of mine how to, record and mix and master and yeah, so we just been doing it ourselves in our own studio. So
Aha.
it's
Yeah, and Kelly really learned on the fly. We had a new piece of recording equipment that we got recently, and he learned as we were recording. We're like learning, and it's like reading the manual as we're doing takes. And so, kudos to him for that. And yeah, so and even dangerously let me get my hands near a couple of knobs here when it was time to mix. So, but yeah, that's more his forte.
And so, like, talk me through a bit. Like, I'm not really that technically knowledgeable, but I've done some recording, so I'm kind of curious. Like, what is the recording process like for you in terms of the practicalities of you two recording yourselves? Like, what does your setup look like? How do you do it?
So we typically have, so we're in our studio. We have seven mics on the drums, and then, I'll typically record the drums first, and I'll go direct with bass. And when we had a guitar player, same thing. We'd go direct. So that way we're just capturing the drums, and then if the scratch takes for bass and before guitar were good, we'd use that as part of, with our overdubs. We'd blend those. So that way there's no, it's completely isolated. And then when you go to mix, it's got the best sound, there's no interference. You can still get a good live sound in there too. We've done that as well. It's just, you can't dial it in as much. It's just kind of what it is, which is
Yeah.
what that last EP was. It was all live in the room.
Right, okay. Whereas this time round, you then re-recorded the bass separately.
Yes, yeah. So I still use the scratch tracks for, if not all, most. And then I actually run. So for the bass, I'll run three bass rigs, left and right, and then three different amps, and then three different speakers, and I'll just use an ABC box, and then do it all at once to save time. Because that way, if it's really locked in, then you don't have to worry about, oh, this is a little off in the timing. A couple of songs when I was learning, I had to do them separate because we did run into some issues with the setup. But once I learned that, then I was like, okay, I can do the split signal, which is what I do live anyway. We'll have a bass cab left and right.
Yeah.
The one on the right's got more bright. It's more mid-rangey. I'll run my effects through that side, and then the other side is all like bass, low end.
So in terms of the recording, then, like you'd have one take, but you'd have different tracks, and then you can adjust the track separately.
Yeah.
Here we go. That's about as technical as I can get with this discussion. So
No, that's it. Yeah. Yeah.
another thing I was wondering about the album, and I don't know if this is entirely a new thing, but you've got some quite long titles, titles like Beneath the Weight of Information or Floating in Dead Space Between the Stars. I'm wondering, are you coming up with more elaborate titles now because you don't have lyrics? So it's kind of like to give people something a bit more to attach ideas to when they're looking at the album.
Well, it was one full poem, and then I just broke it up. And so the whole idea was that's what it was in the first place, was I wrote this poem and I was like, okay, I'll make songs around it. And I just kind of spaced them out. I was like, okay, this is one idea, there's another. So it's almost like a concept album, so it's one
Ah,
piece of, yeah, poetry. And that's what I did. And before, sometimes I'd have longer titles, but we'd always, just for the sake of, remembering them, would, live, on the sheet, it would be like simplified, like one word. We still do that. It's like,
Floating.
oh,
Yeah,
okay,
floating.
yeah,
Yeah.
floating, spite, but yeah, no, it was just yeah, that's how that came about.
so when you say that this was all one poem, do you mean just if you put all the tracks together, or you actually do you have this like written down somewhere else that people can see, like you have a whole poem and you've taken parts out for the titles?
Yeah, that was it. Basically, I had a whole poem, and I took parts out for the titles, except for, let's see, I think, well, obviously the last track, remembering, yeah, Big Sister Kim, that came later, so
Yeah.
that wasn't part of it. But I was like, I got to put this in. It was really soon after she passed, so I was like, I gotta, you know, I wrote the piece, and I was like, I got to put this in here, and for remembering her. You know.
Yeah. And so I think I saw somewhere written that you had dedicated this album to her. So like if you don't mind going into it a little bit, maybe you can tell me a bit about, your sister and what happened, I guess is the question.
Yeah, she was, a great big sister, a great friend, and she helped a lot with, not only my son, but my other sister, Taya's kids. And yeah, we were like good friends. And then she'd been sick for a little while, some a couple years. She was having issues with like uh, every time we'd get sick, like, or she would get sick, she would get pneumonia. And it had to do with like a herniation, a high hernia that was like actually backing everything up and then causing water in her lungs. And she got an operation. This is the first year she didn't get pneumonia, but she did get pretty sick. And it was kind of it was a big surprise to all of us because we thought she'd be around for years to come because how strong she was. And yeah, it was just she was sick, and her daughter Alyssa was taking care of her, and she was having some issue with the medication, like anxiety wise. But my niece had taken the same medication, said just stop taking it, and then she had said that like she felt like she was having a heart attack, and then felt anxious, and Alyssa said, just come lay with me. And then she noticed after a while, like her lips were blue, and then she called the paramedics, and then they told her how to do CPR, brought her back for long enough for them to work on her and try to get her back, and her heart she never really started, like her heart never fully came back, basically, as far as the coroner report said, it was a heart attack.
Yeah. No, it's really tough. Well, my condolences.
Thank you.
And so I think you said that like you'd figured out the poem and then you wanted to put that track in. So did you wrote that music separately? Like did that come after you'd basically done everything else?
Yeah, I was just messing around like I usually do when I'm sitting, at the house. I think I was at the studio because I had my fretless at the studio, so I was playing just in the off because I also work at the studio we rehearse at, so I was like sitting in the office watching the cameras. If anyone needs anything, they call, and so I was just playing, and I wrote all the music there, and just kept rehearsing it different ways, and then just laid it down, and that's how that one was born.
And I don't know if I asked you, Mark, what do you do for work when you're not making music?
Oh, I work in the tech world, so it's far away from rock and roll. But someday, no more work. No. Yeah, so
And
when we make the big time.
well, exactly, just around the corner.
Yeah, with all these pop songs we're writing, I know it's right around the corner.
Yeah. Do you know, it's funny, like when I remember, I don't know, like maybe things have changed in terms of the likelihood of people making, like alternative rock or I'm not exactly saying you're alternative rock, but
Right.
things which are not mainstream.
Mhm.
Maybe like back in the 90s or early 2000s, it was kind of like more imaginable, like Jesus Lizard getting onto a major label.
Yeah.
Obviously that didn't last very long, but like, I feel like the possibility for something like that was a bit different in the late 90s, early 2000s. But I remember I kind of like when I was a teenager listening to music, I kind of thought like, oh, like if a band is in the charts or if I've heard of a band they're written about in a magazine, like they've got a career, they're making money. And it took a while for me to realize that like a lot of the bands that I was really into, like Neurosis, for example, like I think you guys are fans of Neurosis. I kind of realized at a certain point, like, oh yeah, they've got day jobs. Like this is the
Yeah.
thing that they do for the creative outlet. It's not like they're making huge amounts of money touring around playing atmospheric sludge metal.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, you're spot on for sure.
But from that point of view, like on the practical side,
Mhm.
has making music together been something that you can actually, yeah, make money out of? Like, what can does the band pay for itself effectively?
Not really.
No,
It's
I
it's
mean,
it's a money pit.
yeah, I think like most bands, I think to your point of a moment ago of even bigger bands that we, like and go see in, big clubs and stuff, I think are finding it, difficult, to make a living, in this modern age of music. A lot is, I think it's gone back. It seems like, I'm not that well versed, but a lot is having to go back to, just you're making money off the road and all that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, I think most of the bands at our level are kind of like, us where, it's more taking a loss most of the time, but it's a labor of love. So, you just keep going because that's what we want to do.
Yeah. I mean, like to your point about bands on your level, have you noticed like particularly a change over the years, or would you say that, at your level that you're always kind of like struggling to get some kind of financial reward out of it?
I've just noticed it's been the same over the years. It's just been
Yeah.
about the same because on the level that we're at, because we don't go out and tour, and that's the thing. It's like we both have families, and that kind of roots us at home.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And something that's like come up more in interviews that I've been doing, because I'm sort of one of the like sort of the purposes of this podcast is I'm trying to sort of figure out what are the main topics for independent artists and like, what are the things that people commonly have to deal with. So, like obviously streaming services are a big thing now. Social media seems to be a big topic, like whether we want to or not, we kind of have to engage in it. And another thing that I've noticed coming up more and more is the topic of the merch table. So it's like if you're going to play a live show, you've got to take the opportunity to sell merch. And obviously, if you guys aren't touring, then you don't have so many opportunities. But like, is that something that is a big thing for you when you are playing a show that you're going to bring whenever you've got CDs? I don't know if you do T-shirts as well, stuff like that.
Yeah, we do all of it. T-shirts, we have download cards, we have stickers. We did press a certain amount of CDs for this release. So when we're going to be playing shows, people can get those. But yeah, a variety of shirts, all kinds of merch.
So how far back does that go? Kelly, do you remember the first Sludgebucket T-shirts?
Yeah, they were the cover of the self-title, the guy vomiting in the cityscape. Yeah, that was the first T-shirt. Yeah.
And so going back then, like thinking about the history of the band. So what do you remember? You mentioned that you started sort of writing for the band in 2004. Like, what was the genesis of Sludgebucket? Were you making music in other projects before that?
Yeah, so I was in a couple other projects with my good friend John Santos, who he passed away in 2009, and we were in three different, like two, I think at the time, two different projects. So our main one was called Space Grass, taken from the Clutch song, but we were more like psychedelic when we started, more psychedelic, stoner rock, and we were writing the tunes, and the idea was we were in another band where we did like all free jamming. And then we got bored with that. We wanted more structure. So it was a little more interesting to us and thus more interesting to the listener. And then we'd have, spots where we would free jam. And that's how it started. And then our buddy, Jim June, who's the one who actually taught me how to record and stuff like that. He taught John first what gear to buy, everything. He joined the band on keyboards, and he's like a jazz musician, phenomenal musician. He joined, and then there was less writing, so I didn't really have an outlet for writing. Then we were doing John's band, Brain Dozer, which was more like, I'd say, yeah, it was more like on the more rock tip, and I was just playing bass for that project, and it was upon John's suggestion because I was like, I don't really have an outlet for writing. He's like, you should just write your own stuff. You write, just, start your own band, do the vocals, you can sing this and that. And I was like, yeah, I'll do that. And as long as you play guitar for me. And he agreed. So that's how it started. And the name came about it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to do this certain style. It was always kind of like, I'm going to throw everything into it. But I was working at the one of the studios that I was working at. Basically, I worked as a painter, and to finish this one room, I had to strain out the sludge bucket. And I said that to my boss to finish the ceiling, and he's like, "Oh, that'd be a good band name." And I was like, "You're right." And so that's how it began. That was the whole thing. It was never about, oh, this is sludge metal or this is this or that. It was just like, hey, it's a sludge bucket. It's all everything we're influenced by. It's going in here, and that's how it's ever always been.
Yeah, when you put it like that, that does make a lot of sense. Thinking about different lineups that you've had. So like when I was looking through your different releases and seeing who played on them, I noticed that one of your early releases, I think there was like 7 different. Oh, I think it was. Is it? Is it Clown Soul Power Trip or Cown Soul Power Trip? I can't remember what the title is now.
Yeah, it's Clown Soul Power Trip. Yeah,
I think you had
that
about.
was one of my lyrics. Yeah.
I think you had about 7 people playing on that one. Were they actually all in the band at that time, or you just had a variety of different players on the record?
Variety of different players, because that was around that was like we started the album and then John passed, and then there was just there was a lot of stuff going on around that time, people trying to kind of, I was still trying to continue music because I didn't know what I needed to keep going, and kind of like go through my grief. And there was a lot of people, good people around, but there's also people around that were like, oh yeah, we're going to continue John's music without him. And I was like, no, you're not, and basically that's kind of pushed me to continue Sludgebucket because I put an end to that project because that was Brain Dozer. And then after he passed, obviously it was whatever it was Limbo. And then that pushed me to start doing it. And then it was like, well, we have these like half an album with John. And then I was like, well, we got, all our other friends. So our new guitar player, Jordan, when he joined, then he finished up the album. But I think we also had Jim June on keys and probably guitar on another, I think at least one piece, as well as other instruments. And then, yeah, I think we had 2 different drummers too, because at one point we had our original drummer, Doug Weldy, was started with us. And then I think he quit at some point. And then Thomas Perry, he played some tracks, but he was never in the band, and he was a good drummer and good guy that we knew around the studio. And then I think those were the 2 drummers on that one. And then for live, I think Max Adams, a good friend of mine, he's been in and out of the band mostly to fill in because he's such a nice guy and he's so busy. He's like a typical drummer. He's in like 3 bands plus at a time. So Yeah, so that I think that was the deal with that. Oh, and we had our friend, it was a buddy of Doug's play harmonica on a tune too as well.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So, Mark, to Kelly's point about drummers having multiple projects, do you have other bands that you're also playing in?
I don't right now. It's funny. I mean, I've been in those stages of my life where I've had, been in several bands at once. And then I'd kind of gotten out of playing for a little bit. And then at the time, then I hooked up with Kelly and Brad at the time. And so since then, no, I've had some, things. I have some friends that I jam with, and I was jamming with another band at the studio, but that was more short term. So no, just Sludgebucket.
And with the various different lineups that the bands had, how long were you in Sludgebucket before you kind of thought like, all right, I'm in this for the long term? You didn't think like I'm going to get replaced in a couple of years?
I'm still waiting to spontaneously combust.
Spinal Tap.
I'm not sure if I really thought about it. I mean, I probably thought about it in the beginning, for, I had to try out for the band and that kind of stuff. And, it was sort of, in a feeling out period of
Yeah.
that. But then you just kind of get, into the songwriting and the learning and all that. And that time was a lot of learning, of pre-existing material and all that. And then for me, it was getting back out to playing live again at that point. And I didn't really think about it. I mean, I guess I'm in the band. I don't know.
You're half the band.
And thinking about, coming into the band that already had a
Yeah.
bunch of different songs,
Yeah.
what was that like for you in terms of like learning versus, putting your own stamp on it? How much were you, interpreting versus Kelly kind of saying this is the song?
Kelly, was really good about, letting me, I mean, he said, like, this is kind of how it goes, but he was really good about me having my own stamp on it. I did for just learning purposes, to try to learn, as much as I could of the parts. And then also just to kind of, honor the music and what they had done before. I didn't want to change up too much. But I did notice, when I would go back and listen, because I would learn more by him showing me rather than listening to the records, except for that first audition. Then everything else, he just would learn by him showing me in. So then I started just naturally kind of doing my own parts, and he never yelled at me. So,
You took that as
I just
positive
kept on
feedback.
going. So it was a combination, I think, I think like a lot of drummers or musicians that step into a band with a history, you do the parts and you do your own thing.
And when you rehearsed to be in the band, did you have some competition?
I don't think so. I don't know. I have no idea. I don't think so, but I don't know.
No.
That's why I got the gig. That's the only reason I
Yeah.
got the gig.
He was the only one. He was the only one who answered the ad. No. No, there was definitely other people, but it was like, you get people that are prepared and then have chops, and you're like, okay, I can work with this. And then, personality wise, then you're like, okay, yeah, this is let's move forward with this. Because there's been that with I'd say more guitar players, it's been that where it's like, people come in and you're like, okay, this still the same thing, if it's going to work or not. But there was a time between Brad and now, where it was like kind of limbo, where it was like, is this going to work or it's not? And then we listened to rehearsals and we're like, It's not." So we're like, okay, let's just move forward as a duo for now and see what's what.
Yeah.
The only quick follow up to that is your other question is, I liked the drum parts that the drummers did too, because that was part of it. Part of my reason for even auditioning and hitting them up was I liked the music. And part of that is I liked the drumming too. So that, was also another reason to want to try to play at least an approximation of their parts.
Yeah. Thinking about like the fact that you have been playing together for a while, and obviously Kelly's been doing the record for even longer, and we've talked about, having jobs, having families.
Right.
Have you sort of found over time that the amount of time that you've got for the band has changed, or that, or it's kind of like fairly consistently fit a particular space within your lives over the years?
Want to go or me?
You go.
For me, it's evolved. It's gotten because my kids are older than Kelly, so it's gotten progressively more and more time available. So there's less that I have to actually do for them, and so yeah, I have more and more time to be at the studio and all of that. So it's gotten more so. I've always had my delegated times, throughout the week and so forth. But yeah, it's just more all the time now, pretty much.
Yeah, and for me, it's been less and less, because my son's only 7, but it's still quite a bit because I work
Yeah.
there 2 days a week, so I'm there 2 days a week. It's like
Mhm.
it gives me the freedom to to be able to rehearse, and I still have the phone in front of me if someone needs something, do my walkthroughs and make sure everything's okay. So it still affords me quite a bit of time.
I wanted to ask you, going back again, about something else, which, and this brings in your friend who passed away, John Santos, your previous guitarist. I think I read something, Kelly, that you had a label that you started with him. I don't know. I suppose it's you would call it ZZ Pop Records, like it's a ZZ Top thing.
Yeah,
As soon as I said it at
yeah,
that point, I was like, this is obvious now. Now I get it.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. That was John's idea. Yeah.
so is that still a thing? Like, tell me about the label. How did that all come about?
So it was John's idea just to be able to put all of our own music out under one kind of umbrella. So it
Mm,
was his idea, and then we kind of continued it after he passed, to continue to put out music that was finished for all the product projects we did together and the stuff that he did, solo, and then and still Sludgebucket for a while. And then I felt like at some point I ran out of stuff to, put out with stuff with him that was finished. So I kind of felt like it had done its part. It's still out there. We still have the stuff for each of the bands on Bandcamp, but they're all under their own band labels. But then
mm.
I stopped using that label for Sludge Bucket some years back because I just felt like, that was kind of, more so the stuff with John.
Yeah.
I felt it was more appropriate doing that.
So with Sludge Bucket as it is now, do you have a label as such, or you would put these things out as being self-released?
Self-released, yeah.
And is that kind of, do you think that's always going to be the way? Like, are you happy with having, like, I guess I don't really know. Like, is there anything to be gained from having a label versus putting it out yourself?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd have to hear from a label, 'cause maybe distribution, those type of
Yeah.
things were,
Mm.
and those type of things. I think that'd be, have to be seen.
And another thing that I'm curious about, which is like kind of pulling back the curtain, and it's kind of funny as well, because I feel like I'm going to ask you about publicists, because I'm like, I deal with a lot of publicists. A lot of the interviews that I do are through publicists, and I've got some great relationships with publicists, but I also feel like they sort of exist in this behind the scenes world. And sometimes I'm not sure if they even want to be talked about or if they just kind of like
Oh,
want to be
okay.
behind the curtain. But so I got linked up with you through Kyle. And I'm wondering, did you work with publicists in the past, or was there a particular reason why you ended up doing that this time round?
This is the second time around we worked through with Kyle and Good Boy Production, their PR. Because I was like, well, that was kind of I wasn't that good at marketing. I would try, I put the stuff out and it seemed to kind of like just go into the ether and, dissipate. It would be, and I was like, oh, Facebook ads and this stuff that seemed to go nowhere. And I was like, well,
Yeah.
I can't remember if he approached me or if I was looking, but we have had people over the years, hit us up, and I've just kind of been like, nah, because again, it's like it's not like we're making money, so we're gonna, it's gonna be more money that just goes. But yeah, I forget how it came about, but it worked out really well the last time, and I learned some stuff on my own that okay, I can do this and this, but it's good to it makes more sense to go through like he does a really good job, really nice guy, and it's kind of central because either way, if like say, I hit up 5 or 6 of these different, avenues that I know that he also knows, I'm going to be probably spending, some money 5 different ways instead of like a central way. And he's
Yeah.
got more, contacts and connects and stuff like that. So it really just makes sense. And, because I do want to get the music out there. I mean, that's the most important thing. It's like, well, we do it for ourselves first, right? And then from there, it's like, well, let's, see who else can enjoy it, and that's, as far as I kind of go with it, and I think it's worthwhile to get it out there, whether it's, financially, comes to, fruition or not. It's not really about that. It's more about, getting it out to,
Yes,
people's
getting
ears.
people to hear our music, come out and hear it, with whatever medium or platform, and then, also come out and see us live for sure. That's what we want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like it's kind of this age that we're in now, this internet age where in theory everything is instantly accessible. It's kind of hard to know how much people really see things. Like I find this with social media as well. It's like
Yeah.
you post stuff and you think in theory loads of people can see this, but it's kind of hard to know how many people really see it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Kelly and I were just talking about that the other night. That he was talking to me about how he was kind of going about releasing the material. And to your point, you can get oversaturated, flooded. Even, though we're not a big band, but even more reason why you can get kind of lost in all the noise that sort of comes at you
Yeah.
on social media. So kind of being a little thoughtful in terms of how you go about releasing and promoting. Kelly, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah. I'd be more direct about it, like, because, I notice certain, social platforms, there's less attention. Some platforms people really don't pay attention or react, because I mean, you can only go by the reactions that you
Yeah.
see, but then other platforms people are reposting and really engaged, and we actually get feedback. So I've been leaning, I still use different platforms for the sake of having, more reach. But yeah, I notice, certain things, certain avenues seem to have more activity, so that's kind of where I lean in. And then, like I said, that's where PR, comes
Yeah.
in. It's like, really, okay, these are, and specific for, heavy music. I mean, we do a lot of different styles within what we're doing, but it's still pretty heavy. So we still kind of lean into that.
It's funny, like just touching on the style again of Vampiric Earth. So I was like thinking to myself, how would I describe it? Because I think if you just played it to someone and they hadn't heard any of your other stuff, I don't think anyone would say stoner rock. I don't like hear that. I was actually thinking to myself, like, oh, does it remind me of Gone? Do you remember Gone, the band that Greg Ginn had after Black Flag? It was an instrumental three-piece, and he actually had the drummer and the bass player who went on to have Roland's band, and Henry Rollins basically came along and poached Greg Ginn's band and then formed Roland's band.
Oh, wow.
Anyway, they're a cool band. You don't sound anything like them, because I was thinking like maybe they sound like Gone, and then I went to listen to Gone again. I was like, no, they don't sound like Gone. But anyway, it's a cool band, so check them out.
I
Okay.
will, yeah.
But yeah, I don't really
Yeah,
know. Like there were bits where I thought maybe like I heard a bit of Primus in the bass playing. I've seen you mention King Crimson. I don't really know like how I would describe the latest album. Like it's kind of funky, it's kind of proggy, I guess. But yeah, I don't really know. I don't really know quite how I'd characterize it. Do you think there's like a simple description of what your sound is these days?
that's we always get asked that, and it's the hardest answer, because it's not, to different people, they hear different things, because we have
Yeah,
so many different influences. Because
yeah,
we still, like, when you boil it down to, it's like it's the riff and the style of the drums that really makes it what it is. And I just come from different angles, because like you said, we listen to all, from jazz to, heavy music to,
Yeah.
really mellow stuff, and so it's like it all kind of, goes in and comes out with our own, style. We just kind of put it all in there. So it's hard to say, but I know Kyle did say, like, heavy fusion, is pretty, good example, because it's not jazz fusion, but it's more like, it's a fusing of all these different styles, and it's heavy.
I like that. I think heavy fusion is good. Yeah. Like, I don't like to kind of pigeonhole bands or force people to pigeonhole themselves because like it's one of the things that really drives me around the bend is having to like describe stuff by genre because a lot of the time like the music that I enjoy is music that kind of defies a simple categorization, but I think a lot of the time for like, whether it's simply describing to someone what something is, or maybe like if you want to play a festival and you have to say like, well, we're this type of band because they
Yeah.
play X, Y, and Z, then it kind of has that practical purpose. But it's like, yeah, a lot of the time, if music isn't something you can put in a box, that's great. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
so yeah, I'm not going to force you into a box. Heavy fusion, I think, works. So now that the album's out, you mentioned before that you had a CD run that you did of it. Like, is that something that people can just get when they come and see you at shows, or is that actually available to buy elsewhere?
For this run, it was a super short run, so just to see us live, because I've done that in the past through like I think CD Baby, and then we just run out, and then I don't know how to edit. You can see that it's not available, but it's like you can't even like I couldn't find a way to like, and maybe that's just my, I'm not that tech savvy, so that it's like, okay, how do I, because we may not, because certain things, like for instance, I mean, CDs we can read duplicate, over and over, but like T-shirts, we tend to like we have one run and then maybe we'll do it again and then we'll do a different shirt and that's just based on money really because it's like it all goes into one pot so it's like okay for CDs shirts
Yeah.
pens whatever so I mean maybe we'd make it available it's just a matter of like if people wanted that
Yeah, if the
because like you
demand
said
is there.
yeah, because it's so. I mean, records are coming back. We'd love to do an LP, but that's costly as well. So
Yeah.
at this point, it's just kind of like, well, you can get our music digitally. That's what a lot of people do, and they can do it easily. And then that way, we're not having to spend money on shipping or float that cost to the customer, which isn't that much, but it can add up. It's just a matter of yeah, is it something that people would want, and then we'd go from there.
And what about in terms of shows that you've got coming up and in general for people that want to follow the band, having talked about social media? I don't think you have your own website, right?
We did, but it was like it, again, it was like a cost that didn't seem worthwhile, because of all the social. I mean, we were getting more attention through the social media than people
Yeah.
going through our website. So
Yeah.
I was like, I nixed it. I was like, okay, because we had it for a few years, and then recently, was it this year or the end of last year? I cut it off. So yeah, I mean, it would be yeah, we're on Instagram, Facebook. What is it? Blue Sky,
Oh yeah. I just
Twitter.
I just
Yeah.
turned over there. I finally quit Twitter. I said fuck you to Elon Musk, and I joined Blue Sky.
Yeah. I joined Blue Sky, but I stayed on Twitter. I'm like, because I still get attention through there. And it's like, I
Mm,
don't follow the politics. I just, so that's the thing with the algorithms too, is like the less you focus on these things and they kind of, they don't go away. And I know I agree with that statement, but I'm still on like Tumblr and all these other things. It's like, well, we get different, groups that actually, follow us and like us there and they're not elsewhere kind of thing. But
yeah.
I'm still kind of one foot out the door, like, okay, is this worthwhile? But yeah, but I'll post to all the different pages. Yeah, we're on YouTube, we have a YouTube page. And yeah, like I said, I think we have other stuff that I've forgotten about. Maybe they're gone now too. There's a couple sites. Can't even remember the name right now.
But I guess you don't
But
really
yeah,
have any competition with your handle. So it's like if people look for Sludgebucket, if you're there, they're going to find you.
I think so now, but that's the weird thing is
Yeah.
like so when we started there was no one, and then there was one band that popped up and on MySpace of all places, and they just had like Sludge and Bucket, and then no music. They disappeared, and then I think there was like a Slipknot cover band in somewhere in the Midwest, and then there was a band that popped up I think a couple of years ago and they were actually sludge metal and they were in I think Australia of all places. Yeah.
Ah.
So And
All
they were
right.
pretty good. I kind of let them know, hey, we're, because we don't own the rights to it, not trademarked or anything. So I was like, hey, just to let you know, we've been using the name since this such and such a date. They didn't say anything. I'm like, okay. And they might still be together, but ours is like one word. So
Yeah.
I did that years ago. It was like instead of Sludgebucket, which it used to
Mm,
be, and the other band popped up, I was like, just so it's, but we'll still pop up either way. But there's some other stuff that pops up that even with just that term, of a sludge bucket, whether it be Ghostbusters, or the actual drink, the sludge, the tea and coffee mix.
okay. I underestimated how ubiquitous Sludgebucket is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
As
Right.
far as shows, yeah, we have our first show coming up, and we took a little bit of a break to record April 25th at the Ivy Room in Albany, which is near Berkeley, California. So Ivy Room, April 25th should be fun. The band who's putting on the show, it's their drummer's birthday. It's a big bash, so it should be a lot of fun.
Nice. And is that the only show that you've got lined up right now?
At
So
the
far,
moment,
yeah.
And then in general, if people want to see, like, you'll post all the things that are coming up on Instagram or wherever else.
Yeah.
yeah.
Nice. Well, Kelly and Marc, it was great to meet you and talk to you. Thank you for your time.
You as well. Thank you so much.
Right on.
And
Thanks,
yeah,
Tom.
it's been a pleasure listening to your music. It's super cool. So I hope in my tiny, 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 tiny little corner of the subsection of the subsection of the subsection of the underground music world that I can have some tiny little influence to guide people towards your music.
We really
We
appreciate that.
appreciate you.
It's been great chatting with you.
My pleasure. Thanks, guys.